He groaned softly. Adobe's heart leaped. "What's wrong, my love?" she asked, her voice filled with fake concern. I don't know," Ifeanyi said, his voice strained. My stomach, it hurts." Adaobi leaned closer, her hand on his shoulder. "Hey, are you okay? Should I get you something?" Ifeanyi shook his head, his face contorting in pain. "Oh, it's getting worse. It's getting worse." Adaobi stood in the kitchen, her hand trembling slightly as she held a glass of orange juice. She glanced around nervously, her sharp eyes darting to every corner of the room, ensuring no one was watching. The house was quiet, as it often was at this time of the afternoon. Ifeanyi was upstairs in his study, working, completely unaware of the storm brewing downstairs. "This is the moment," Adaobi muttered to herself, her voice low but determined. "No one will stop me." She took a deep breath and stepped out of the kitchen, her heels clinking softly against the tiled floor. The spacious dining area came into view, its polished table gleaming under the bright chandelier. Adaobi walked towards the table, carefully placed the glass of juice down, and once again looked around like a thief trying not to be caught. She reached into the pocket of her loose-fitting gown and brought out a small bottle filled with a clear colorless liquid. The bottle's label had been peeled off, leaving no trace of its contents or origin. Adaobi's fingers fumbled with the cap for a moment before she managed to open it. Her hand shook and she poured a few drops of the liquid into the glass. "That should be enough," she whispered. Her eyes studied the glass intently, making sure the liquid blended seamlessly into the juice. Satisfied, she closed the bottle, slipped it back into her pocket, and gave the glass a quick swirl. She stood there, staring at the juice as if hypnotized, her mind racing with thoughts. Her lips parted and she began talking to herself. "This is it," she said, her voice trembling at first, but growing steadier with each word. "I'm done wasting time. Once Ifeanyi drinks this, it's all over. He will die, and I will take everything that belongs to him. Me and Paul will leave this country for good." Adaobi paused and laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "Yes, this is the only way. Ifeanyi is not meant for me. All I want is his money, and I don't care if he dies." The sound of her own words seemed to empower her, filling her with a sense of twisted confidence. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, startling her. She fumbled to pull it out and saw Paul's name flashing on the screen. "Paul," she said, her voice softening. She answered quickly, her tone suddenly sweet and affectionate. "My love." Paul's deep voice came through the phone. "Have you done it? Did you add the substance?" Adaobi's lips curled into a sly smile. "Sharp, sharp, my love. I have done it. The glass is on the dining table. I'm just about to call Ifeanyi to come downstairs and drink it." Paul chuckled. "Good. Make sure it's a clean job." We can't afford to mess this up. Once he's gone, it's just you and me, Ada. You know that, right? I know, my love, Adaobi replied, her voice filled with emotion. I have waited too long for this moment. Don't worry, very soon, I will call you once it's done. All right, Paul said. Be careful, okay? No mistakes. Of course, Adaobi assured him. I love you, Paul. I love you too, Ada, Paul replied, his voice dripping with charm. The call ended, and Adaobi stood in the dining area for a moment, clutching her phone tightly. Her mind was made up. There was no turning back now. She straightened her shoulders, adjusted her gown, and began walking towards the stairs. As she climbed the staircase, her thoughts swelled. Memories of her life with Ifeanyi played in her mind. He had been kind, caring, and generous. Everything a woman could ask for in a husband. But Adaobi's heart was not with him. Her heart belonged to Paul, the man who has swept her off her feet with his sweet words and promises of a glamorous life abroad. When she reached the top of the stairs, she paused, her hand resting on the banister. She thought about the wealth Ifeanyi had worked so hard to build, the luxurious house, the expensive cars, the investment. All of it would be hers once he was out of the picture. This is for the best, she whispered to herself, trying to silence the small voice of doubt creeping into her mind. She walked down the hallway, stopping in front of Ifeanyi's study. The door was slightly ajar, and she could hear the faint sound of his keyboard clicking. She took a deep breath, rehearsing her words in her mind. Knocking softly, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. Ifeanyi looked up from his laptop, his face lighting up when he saw her. My love, he said warmly. Is everything all right? Adaobi forced a smile. Yes, my love, everything is fine. I just thought you might like a drink. I made some juice for you. It's on the dining table. Ifeanyi's brow furrowed slightly. Juice? That's thoughtful of you. Thank you. She nodded, her hands clasped in front of her to hide their trembling. You have been working so hard, my love. You deserve a break. Ifeanyi chuckled and leaned back in his chair. Ah, you are right. I could use a break. I'll be down in few minutes. No rush, Adaobi said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. Take your time, my love. She turned and walked out of the study, her heart pounding in her chest. As she descended the stairs, she muttered under her breath, this is it. Everything changes today. Adaobi returned to the dining area and stood by the table, staring at the glass of juice. Her mind raced with thoughts of the future she and Paul had planned, their escape, the luxury, and the freedom. She touched her phone, tempted to call Paul again for reassurance, but she stopped herself. No, she said firmly. I don't need him to hold my hand. I can do this. Time seemed to slow, and she waited for Ifeanyi to come downstairs. Her nerves were on edge, and every little sound made her jump. The ticking of the wall clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant chirping of birds outside. It all seemed unbearably loud. Stay calm, she whispered to herself. Just stay calm. She rehearsed her plan over and over in her mind, every detail carefully thought out, Ifeanyi would drink the juice, and within minutes, the poison would take effect. She would feign shock and call the ambulance, but by the time help arrived, it would be too late. Her phone buzzed again, and she quickly checked the screen. It was a message from Paul. "Make sure you don't panic. Everything will be fine." Adaobi nodded to herself. "Yes," she said softly. "Everything will be fine." She took one last deep breath, turned towards the stairs, and called out, "My love, your juice is ready. Come down and have a drink." A few minutes later, Ifeanyi came downstairs, a warm smile on his face as usual. He wore his favorite house slippers and a simple t-shirt, looking relaxed. Adaobi heard his footsteps, quickly composed herself. She plastered a smile on her face, though her heart was pounding like a drum. "My love, you are down?" she said sweetly, trying to sound natural. "Come sit and have your drink." Ifeanyi noticed her nervousness. He didn't show it. He walked over to the dining table, his smile still in place. "Thank you, my love," he said. Adaobi pulled out the chair for him, her hands trembling slightly. "Come sit here," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. Ifeanyi sat down, giving her a grateful nod. "You didn't have to go through all this trouble," he said as he adjusted himself in the chair. "It's no trouble at all," Adaobi replied, forcing another smile. "You have been working so hard. You need to relax and take care of yourself." Ifeanyi looked at the glass of juice in front of him and nodded appreciatively. "You are too good to me, my wife. Thank you." Adaobi waved her hand dismissively. "It's nothing, my love. Just have your drink. It will make you feel better." Ifeanyi reached for the glass, his movement slow and casual. Adaobi's heart raced as she watched him lift it to his lips. "Drink it all," she urged softly, her voice almost a whisper. Ifeanyi took a sip, then another. The sweet taste of orange juice seemed to please him because he smiled at her. "This is really good," he said. Adaobi nodded, her fake smile growing wider. "Finish it up, my love. It's good for you." Without hesitation, Ifeanyi tilted the glass and drank it all. When he was done, he set the glass down on the table and let out a satisfied sigh. "That hit the spot," he said. "Thank you, Ada." "You are welcome, my love," Adaobi said, her smile unwavering even though her palms were sweaty. "Would you like some more?" Ifeanyi shook his head. "No, I'm fine. One glass is enough for me." Adaobi nodded and gestured towards the living room. "Why don't you go to the sofa and rest? You have been working all day." "Good idea," Ifeanyi agreed. He stood up, stretched his arms, and walked to the living room. Adaobi watched him leave, her smile fading the moment he turned his back. She grabbed the glass from the table and hurried to the kitchen. Once inside, she placed the glass in the sink and quickly pulled out her phone. Her fingers trembled as she typed a message to Paul. "It's done. He drank it. I will let you know once it happens." She hit send and took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Stay calm, Adaobi. "Stay calm," she muttered. "It's almost over." After a moment, she returned to the living room, finding Ifeanyi sitting on the sofa, watching a football match on TV. He looked completely at ease, his head resting on the back of the couch. Adaobi sat down beside him, her eyes constantly darting towards him, searching for any signs of the poison taking effect. She forced herself to smile and said, "Are you okay, my love?" Ifeanyi glanced at her and nodded. "I'm fine," he said, smiling back. Minutes passed, and Adaobi continued to steal glances at him. Her nerves were on edge, and her hands were clenched tightly in her lap. Then, suddenly, Ifeanyi's expression changed. His brows furrowed, and he placed a hand on his stomach. "Ah!" he groaned softly. Adaobi's heart leaped. "What's wrong, my love?" she asked, her voice filled with fake concern. I don't know," Ifeanyi said, his voice strained. My stomach, it hurts." Adaobi leaned closer, her hand on his shoulder. "Hey, are you okay? Should I get you something?" Ifeanyi shook his head, his face contorting in pain. "Oh, it's getting worse. It's getting worse," he said, clutching his stomach with both hands. "Oh no!" Adaobi exclaimed, trying to sound panicked. "What could it be?" Ifeanyi cried out in pain, doubling over on the sofa. Adaobi knelt beside him, pretending to be worried. "Ifeanyi, talk to me. What's happening?" I don't know. Ifeanyi shouted, his voice weak. Then, all of a sudden, his body went limp. His head fell back against the sofa, and his eyes stared blankly at the ceiling. Adaobi shook him. "Ifeanyi! Ifeanyi!" she called, her voice trembling. There was no response. His chest didn't rise or fall. He wasn't breathing. Adaobi stared at him for a moment, her heart racing. "He's dead," she whispered to herself. A mix of fear and relief washed over her. She grabbed her phone and dialed Paul's number. He picked up almost immediately. "It's done," she said, her voice shaking. "Ifeanyi is dead. Come quickly." Paul's voice was calm and reassuring. "Relax, Ada. Don't panic. I'll be there soon. Just wait." "Hurry, Paul, hurry," Adaobi pleaded. After ending the call, she began pacing the living room, her mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. She couldn't just sit there. She needed to act quickly. She ran upstairs to their bedroom and began searching through the drawers. She found the house papers, car documents, and a stash of cash Ifeanyi had hidden. "This is all mine now," she muttered, stuffing everything into a briefcase. She grabbed his ATM cards and packed all his expensive watches and jewelry into a bag. When she was done, she carried the bags downstairs and placed them near the front door. She sat on the sofa, staring at Ifeanyi's lifeless body, waiting for Paul to arrive. "It's almost over," she told herself. "Just a little longer, and we'll be free." Paul rushed into the living room, his face lit with excitement. He pulled Adaobi into a tight hug, whispering, "My love, you did it. You did a clean job. I'm so proud of you." Adaobi, still trembling from everything that had happened, hugged him back but quickly pulled away. Paul, what's next? What do we do now? Paul stepped back, running his fingers through his hair as he scanned the room. We need to move fast. Let's gather everything valuable and sell the cars immediately. We'll use the money to get out of here. First flight out of the country tomorrow morning. What about Ifeanyi's body? Adaobi asked, her voice shaking. She glanced at the sofa where Ifeanyi's lifeless body lay, looking peaceful yet terrifying. Paul rubbed his chin, thinking, we'll take him upstairs and lock him in the bedroom. No one will look for him there for days. By the time anyone finds him, he will be long gone. Adaobi shook her head. No, that's too risky. What if someone comes looking for him? What if they hear us carrying him? I think it's better we leave him here. We'll just disappear. Nobody will know where we went. Paul sighed and nodded reluctantly. Fine. Let's do it your way. Did you take everything we need? The papers, the cash? Adaobi nodded quickly. I've packed everything. It's all in the bags. Paul grabbed one of the bags and heaved it over his shoulder. All right, let's go. As Adaobi bent down to pick up the other bag, a loud knock echoed through the house. They both froze, their eyes wide with fear. Who is that? Paul whispered, his voice trembling. I don't know. Adaobi whispered back. She placed the bag down gently and motioned for Paul to stay quiet. The knock came again, louder this time. Auntie Adaobi! A cheerful voice called from outside. It's me, Mercy. Adaobi's heart sank. It was Ifeanyi's younger sister, who had just returned from school. She had completely forgotten about her. What do we do? Paul hissed, his eyes darting towards the door. Adaobi swallowed hard. I will handle it, she said, trying to steady her shaking hands. She walked to the door and opened it slightly, peeking out to see Mercy standing there with a bright smile. Auntie, how are you? Mercy greeted her warmly. Adaobi forced a smile. Oh, hi, Mercy. I wasn't expecting you to be back soon. Mercy laughed. Well, I came straight from school. Where is my brother? I missed him so much. Adaobi's mind raced. Oh, Ifeanyi isn't here right now. He traveled for work. Actually, I'm about to travel too. You should go and come back later. Mercy's smile faded and her brows furrowed. Traveled? Well, this is my house too. I live here with my brother. I have nowhere else to go. Adaobi clenched her teeth, her fake smile faltering. Mercy, please, you need to leave. Now is not the good time. Just go away. Go back to school. Go anywhere. Mercy frowned, stepping closer. What's going on, Auntie Ada? Why are you acting so strange? Adaobi's patience snapped. She pushed Mercy back gently but firmly. Just go, Mercy. Come back later. She quickly shut the door and locked it, leaning against it as if she tried to catch her breath. Paul was pacing in the living room, his face pale. What happened? Who was it? It was Mercy, Adaobi said, her voice shaking. She wants to stay here, but I told her to leave. Paul's eyes widened. What if she doesn't leave? What if she comes back with someone? Adaobi shrugged helplessly. I don't know, Paul. I don't know what else to do. Paul grabbed her shoulders, his grip firm. We can't let her mess this up. We'll bring her inside and he paused. his voice dropping to a whisper. "We will kill her too." Adaobi's eyes widened in horror. "No, Paul. I can't do that. I have already done too much. I can't kill her." Paul tightened his grip, his voice desperate. "Listen to me, Ada. It's the only way. If she finds out what we did, we are finished. Do you want to go to jail? Do you want to lose everything?" Adaobi shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. "No. I said no, Paul. I can't do it." As they argued, a sudden movement caught their attention. They both turned, and their hearts stopped. Standing in the corner of the room, staring at them with cold, piercing eyes, was Ifeanyi. His face was pale, but his expression was angry. His lips pressed into a thin line. Paul stumbled backward, his voice trembling. What is this? Are you a ghost?" Adaobi screamed, her hands flying to her mouth. "Ifeanyi, is that you?" Ifeanyi took a step closer, his eyes never leaving theirs. "So," he said, his voice calm yet filled with menace, "this is what you planned for me? My own wife?" Adaobi fell to her knees, shaking her head. "Please, Ifeanyi, don't hurt me. It wasn't my fault. Paul made me do it." Paul pointed at Adaobi, his face pale with fear. "No, she's lying. It was her idea. She said she didn't love you. She only wanted your money." Ifeanyi tilted his head, a bitter smile forming on his lips. "So, this is how it ends. Betrayed by the two people I trusted most." Adaobi crawled towards him, her hands clasped in desperation. "Please, my love, forgive me. I was stupid. I didn't mean to. Enough!" Ifeanyi's voice boomed, cutting her off. Paul and Adaobi screamed, bolting towards the kitchen as Ifeanyi began walking after them. "You can't run from me," he said, his voice echoing. In the kitchen, Adaobi grabbed a knife, holding it out in front of her. "Stay back," she cried. "Please, Ifeanyi, don't hurt us." Paul was crouched in the corner, trembling. "He's a ghost. I told you we shouldn't have done this." Ifeanyi stopped in the doorway, his smile widening. "You are afraid now. You weren't afraid when you planned to kill me." Adaobi dropped the knife, falling to her knees. "I'm sorry. I'll do anything. Just don't hurt me." Ifeanyi stared at them for a long moment, then turned and walked away. Paul and Adaobi looked at each other, their breaths coming in short, panicked gasps. "Where did he go?" Paul whispered. "I don't know," Adaobi said, her voice trembling. They ran back to the living room, but Ifeanyi was nowhere to be seen. "We need to get out of here," Paul said, grabbing Adaobi's arms. They ran to the front door, flinging it open, only to stop in their tracks. Standing on the doorstep with a calm expression was Ifeanyi. Beside him was Mercy, who looked just as confused as they were terrified. Adaobi and Paul screamed, slamming the door shut and running back to the living room. They clung to each other, their bodies shaking with fear. "What do we do now?" Adaobi whispered, tears streaming down her face. Paul shook his head, unable to speak. The nightmare was far from over. Paul and Adaobi stood in the living room, their backs pressed against the wall, their bodies trembling. Their eyes darted around, looking for a way to escape. But the house felt like it was closing in on them. Suddenly, the door creaked open and Ifeanyi walked in, followed closely by Mercy. Adaobi gasped, clutching Paul's arm tightly. "No! Stay back!" Adaobi screamed. "You're supposed to be dead. What do you want from us?" Paul's voice was shaky as he added, "Please, Ifeanyi, don't hurt us. We are sorry." Ifeanyi raised his hand, signaling for them to stop talking. "Enough of this nonsense," he said firmly. "I'm not a ghost. I'm alive." Adaobi froze, her eyes widening. "What? You are alive?" Paul stammered. "But how? We saw you. Ifeanyi walked closer, his face calm but his eyes filled with anger. "Sit down," he commanded, pointing to the sofa. Adaobi and Paul hesitated, but the sternness in Ifeanyi's voice left no room for argument. They slowly lowered themselves onto the sofa, their heads bowed in shame. "You want to know how I'm still alive?" Ifeanyi began, pacing the room. "Let me tell you exactly what happened." Adaobi's hands trembled as she clasped them together. Paul sat stiffly, staring at the floor. Ifeanyi took a deep breath and began his story. "I was in my study, working on a project, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mercy. She told me to check the CCTV footage immediately. I didn't understand at first, but I trusted her judgment, so I opened the live feed." He paused, his voice growing heavier. "What I saw shocked me to my core. There you are, Adaobi, standing at the dining with a glass of juice in your hand. I watched as you pulled out a bottle and poured something into the drink. You shook it, looking around like a thief, and placed it back on the table. I couldn't believe my eyes." Adaobi covered her face with her hands, her tears streaming uncontrollably. Ifeanyi continued, his voice steady. "I immediately texted Mercy, asking her how she knew. She told me she just returned from school earlier, wanting to surprise us, and she gradually opened the living room door unnoticed by you and saw you acting suspiciously. She suspected something wasn't right and decided to alert me." Mercy stepped forward, her arms crossed over her chest. "I saw you, Auntie Ada," she said, her voice laced with disappointment. "You didn't even bother to check if someone else was around. You were too busy plotting to kill my brother." Ifeanyi nodded. "When I realized what was happening, I told Mercy to stay alert. I instructed her to wait until you came upstairs and then switch the poison drink with a fresh one. She did exactly as I asked." Adaobi's mouth opened, but no words came out. "So, my dear wife," Ifeanyi said, his tone dripping with sarcasm, "you and your boyfriend here thought you had succeeded. But as you can see, I'm very much alive, thanks to my sister." Paul's jaw dropped, and he stammered, "You mean you saw everything from the start?" Ifeanyi's eyes burned with fury as he turned to Paul. "Yes, everything. And I had everything too. Your little plan to kill me and run away with my money. It's all on record. The police will enjoy watching them." Adaobi fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. "Ifeanyi, please. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I don't know what came over me. Please forgive me." Mercy shook her head, stepping closer to Adaobi. Why, Auntie Adaobi? Why would you do this? My brother loved you. He married you, gave you a good life, and treated you like a queen. And this is how you repay him? By plotting to kill him with this slow life? Adaobi looked up at Mercy, her face wet with tears. I don't know what I was thinking. It was a mistake. Please forgive me. Mercy scoffed, her voice rising. A mistake? Ganging up with this man to kill my brother wasn't a mistake. It was evil, pure evil. And you know what? You won't get away with it. Paul, realizing the situation was spiraling out of control, tried to defend himself. Look, I didn't want to hurt anyone. This was all Adaobi's idea. She said she didn't love Ifeanyi. She just wanted his money. I was just helping her. Liar! Adaobi shouted, turning on him. You are the one who gave me the poison. You told me to do it. Enough! Ifeanyi's voice boomed, silencing them both. You are both as guilty as each other. Stop pointing fingers. You planned this together, and you will both face the consequences. Adaobi crawled towards Ifeanyi, clutching the hem of his trousers. Please, my husband, I'm begging you. Don't call the police. I will do anything to make it right. Just give me one more chance. Ifeanyi stared down at her, his face expressionless. Well, it's too late for that, Adaobi. You didn't think of giving me a chance when you poured poison into my drink. You didn't think of my life or my dreams. All you thought about was money. You and Paul will rot in jail for this. At that moment, the sound of sirens filled the air. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows, and a firm knock came at the door. Police! A voice called from outside. Ifeanyi turned to Mercy. Let them in. Mercy opened the door, and two police officers stepped inside. They looked around, taking in the scene. Ifeanyi pointed to Adaobi and Paul. These are the two criminals you are looking for. They tried to kill me and steal everything I've worked for. One of the officers stepped forward, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. You are both under arrest, he said, his voice firm. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Adaobi wailed as the officers pulled her to her feet and handcuffed her. Please, Ifeanyi, don't do this. I'm sorry. Paul struggled as they cuffed him, shouting, This is all a mistake. I didn't do anything. The officers ignored their pleas, leading them out of the house. As the door closed behind them, silence filled the room. Ifeanyi let out a deep sigh, his shoulders relaxing for the first time. Mercy walked over to him and wrapped her arms around him tightly. It's over, big brother. They can't hurt you anymore. Ifeanyi hugged her back, his voice filled with gratitude. Thank you, Mercy. If it weren't for you, I may not be standing here right now. Mercy smiled up at him. You have always been there for me. It was my turn to protect you. They stood together, the bond between them stronger than ever. That night, Ifeanyi sat alone in the living room, the dim light from the table lamp casting shadows across the walls. The events of the day had left him shaking, his heart heavy with sorrow and betrayal. He leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling as his mind replayed everything Adaobi had done. His wife, the woman he had loved deeply, the woman he had trusted with his life, had plotted to kill him. The thought pierced his heart like a dagger. He couldn't understand how someone he had given his whole heart to could betray him so cruelly. How did I miss the signs? Ifeanyi whispered to himself, his voice trembling. His thoughts drifted back to 3 years ago, a simpler time when everything seemed perfect. It was a bright Saturday afternoon in Owerri. Ifeanyi had traveled from Abuja to attend the wedding of his close friend Uche. The event was grand, filled with vibrant colors, cheerful music, and the aroma of delicious Igbo delicacies. Ifeanyi, dressed in a tailored white agbada, mingled with the other guests, exchanging pleasantries and enjoying the festive atmosphere. As he stood by the table, his eyes caught sight of her, Adaobi. She was standing with a group of friends, her laughter lighting up the room. She was stunning, her beauty effortless. Her flawless dark skin seemed to glow. Her eyes sparkled with life, and her smile was infectious. She wore a coral gown that flowed gracefully around her, and her presence commanded attention. For a moment, Ifeanyi forgot everything else. His heart raced as he watched her, completely captivated. Summoning his courage, he approached her. "Excuse me," he said, his voice steady but nervous. "I couldn't help but notice your smile. It's the most beautiful thing here today." Adaobi turned to him, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but confident. "And you are?" "Ifeanyi," he said, extending his hand. "And you?" "Adaobi," she replied, shaking his hand with a warm smile. They talked for hours, the wedding fading into the background as they got to know each other. They exchanged numbers before parting ways, and from that day on, they stayed in touch. In the weeks that followed, they went on several dates, and Ifeanyi fell more in love with her each time. She was everything he had ever wanted: kind, intelligent, and beautiful. One evening, under the stars at a rooftop restaurant in Abuja, Ifeanyi proposed. Adaobi had laughed and cried at the same time, nodding enthusiastically as he slid the ring onto her finger. Their wedding was the happiest day of Ifeanyi's life. The ceremony was elegant and intimate, filled with love and blessings from family and friends. Their marriage seemed perfect. Adaobi was the perfect wife, caring, supportive, and always by his side. But now, sitting in the quiet of his living room, Ifeanyi realized it had all been a lie. Unable to sit still, he went to their bedroom, opening the closet and drawers where Adaobi kept her belongings. He needed answers, something, anything, to help him understand why she had done this. As he sifted through her things, he found a small bottle tucked away at the back of a drawer. Curious, he picked it up and examined it. His heart sank when he realized it was a contraceptive pill. For a moment, he couldn't move. His mind raced as the truth hit him like a thunderbolt. They had spent years praying for a child, crying together, visiting doctors, and holding on to hope. All the while, Adaobi had been taking measures to prevent it from happening. "So, this is what she has been doing," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "All this time?" He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the bottle in his hand. A wave of emotions crashed over him: anger, sadness, disbelief. He felt like a fool. He had loved her so much, trusted her completely, and she had betrayed him in more ways than one. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he blinked them away, refusing to let himself break down. Just then, the door creaked open and Mercy stepped inside. She had been worried about her brother and wanted to check on him. "Big bro," she said softly, sitting down beside him. "Are you okay?" Ifeanyi looked at her, his face tired and worn. "I don't know, Mercy. I feel like my whole life has been a lie. I gave her everything, and she gave me nothing but pain." Mercy placed her hand on his, giving it a gentle squeeze. "I know it hurts, but you are not alone. I'm here for you. and we'll get through this together. Adaobi may have betrayed you, but you are still the kind, loving man I've always looked up to. Ifeanyi nodded, his heart aching but comforted by his sister's words. She stopped us from having children, Mercy, he said, his voice breaking. We kept praying and hoping, but she was preventing it all along. How could she do this to me? Mercy shook her head, her eyes filled with sadness. Some people don't value what they have until it's gone. But, brother, don't let her actions define your life. You deserve better, and you will find happiness again. He sighed, leaning back against the headboard. I just don't know how to move forward from this. One step at a time, Mercy said firmly. You are strong, brother. You have always been strong. And no matter what happens, I will always be here for you. Ifeanyi gave her a small grateful smile. Thank you, Mercy. I don't know what I would do without you. As the night deepened, Ifeanyi felt a glimmer of hope amidst the pain. Though his heart was broken, he knew he had the strength to heal and rebuild his life. With his sister by his side, he was ready to face whatever the future held. And the story came to an end. Be careful of the people you trust and surround yourself with. Betrayal hurts deeply, especially when it comes from those closest to you. Always strive to love genuinely and reciprocate the love and care given to you. True relationships are built on trust, honesty, and mutual respect. Thank you so much for watching this amazing story on African Stories by V. If you liked it and felt inspired, please show your support by clicking the like button, sharing with your friends, and leaving a comment below. To see more interesting stories and learn about different cultures, subscribe to African Stories by V, and don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support means a lot and helps us bring more stories to you. Until we meet again, stay connected, stay inspired, and keep smiling.